La la la. We have started. Okay, so we're going to, the four of us, have a conversation about how we would each shade this eye, and by now you should have the outline we've given you traced into your sketchbook so that you can follow along. So, Ms. Summerall, where would you start on this picture?
Well, because I'm left-handed, I start from the right side and work left so that I don't smear my work as I'm working, and I like to start with the darkest areas first.
I also like to start with the darkest areas first to establish some dark darks because the paper's already white, so I want that big contrast at first, and I'd work on my grays after that.
I like to start in the middle values because then I can go lighter or darker if needed, because I can always add, but it's harder to take it away.
I agree, Ms. Devlin. I also like to start with the middle values and work my way back.
All right, so
Alrighty.
let's get started.
Start drawing. So while you're drawing, how do you guys hide your strokes as you fill in an area?
Hide the linear look of them.
Mm-hmm.
I go different directions.
Okay.
When I start seeing that it's looking streaky, I go a different direction to minimize that and cover up that streakiness. Also being careful.
And overlapping
beginning.
your strokes,
Yeah,
too.
overlapping and going different directions. Is anybody pressing hard?
No.
Not yet. I am choking up on mine. When I do the darkest, I have my fingers here. When I do the lightest, I always have my fingers way at the back because you can't press hard when your fingers way at the back end of your pencil.
Right. And I learned that once in college. The very, very lightest areas are the hardest to do with the pencil because you have to move your hand way far back and have hardly any pressure. But I think the tortillons will give us a simpler way to show you how to do that.
Now the shapes of the value in the eye are done out with lines, and hopefully you did your shapes extremely light because there's times you have to go in there and erase that line right when you get to it because it's not something you really want to show. I'm doing that now right here because if I left that line, it would look like a line, and that's just to tell me that's where I need to get my value changing quite a bit to lighter. So I lightened it so I can go over it.
Yeah, so if your outlining line on your picture is darker than the value you're trying to draw, you need to erase it away a little bit so that you don't look like you have a filled-in coloring book. So for me, along this line is where this darker edge is, so I'm starting to blend and get those sorted out on mine.
Do we know if this is upside down or right side up to the video camera? Do we know?
I can switch it.
Yeah, in a little bit we'll switch it then.
No. Movie Maker.
Oh, wonderful, Movie Maker. Miss Devlin knows how to use Movie Maker.
I had,
No idea how to edit.
I had to figure that out for a contest submission.
Okay, so I'm at a point where I've got
use it
to
for school.
lighten my line also. If I'm trying to do something right on a line, I pinch my kneaded eraser so I can get in there and do it.
Yeah, you can shape it to your advantage.
I know we need some background music.
I know.
Yeah.
One thing to make sure you don't do, especially in a large area, and I'll show you on here, is long strokes are awful. You can't get rid of them. It fills in an area, but it fills it in ugly, and you're going to have to fix that. But if you do this in, this is showing up.
Yeah, your edges.
If you just work like this in big long patches, hopefully you can see that where the ends of those lines overlapped, it's darker, and you can never really get rid of that. So it's going to actually take you less time, because you know we're going to make you go back and fix it. It's gonna take you less time to do it correctly the right way and change your pencil direction and work kind of all around.
If you work all directions at all times, you'll have less linear and less overlap.
Right.
Can't tell what this line is right here.
I think that line is the middle of this dark thing.
And what is this
Which
line
line?
here?
This line represents the basic upper portion of
Okay.
the eyelash area. Now, on these eyelashes, and it's a man's eye, there's no real defined upper eyelashes because he doesn't look like a girl with mascara on. And so it needs to be soft, it needs to be fairly blurry, and pretty undefined on purpose. If you define it, it's going to look like a cartoon.
So I think for right now I've got enough on this upper eyelid that I can use the tortillon some. This is a fairly smooth middle value, and I'm gonna go in and smooth it out to match the texture that's in the photograph. And use the tortillon the same way that you use the pencil, change directions and do it lightly. Because if you have bad strokes on your tortillon, you're also going to embed that into your paper, and those are really hard to fix. But once your tortillon is dirty, you see out here on this outside where it gets really light, I can just use the dirty tortillon to draw that gradation.
Oh, so true. There's so many times that the tortillon actually does so much work for you that your pencil can't even do. It's very hard to get a super, super light gray with a pencil without having strokes. But the tortillon is basically a dirty stub that once you pick up some dirt, I call it dirt, it's graphite, but once you pick up some of that somewhere else, you can go redistribute it in a super light gray area, and voila, it's done quickly. I'm doing it around the, on the white part of the eyeball before I even put the iris in. I'm just gonna take my dirty, because I'm smearing on his eyelid to get it smooth, and then that creates the what I call dirt on my tortillon, and then I'm gonna go over here and redistribute it on the white part of the eyeball. And keep in mind that eyelashes always create a shadow on the eyeball, and you're never going to get a realistic look if you make the white part of the eyeball bright white. It just isn't. And depending on the sunlight, sometimes it can be extremely dark.
So does everybody notice that all of our drawings look pretty ugly right now?
Oh yes, drawings go through ugly stages.
It's going to be really ugly before it gets pretty. It doesn't happen immediately, so be patient with yourself.
So never fear.
And we're not starting over on a
Right.
new page.
Right. If we're unhappy with something, we fix it. We erase it, fix it, enhance it, do whatever it takes.
And there's probably never a place where you're going to only have one try at the values, because it's all kind of relative, and that's why I like to start with the middle ones, is because then I have something to gauge my dark up to compare it, because on a plain sheet of white paper, any mark you put on there is going to look like it's dark because it's all white around it. So sometimes, well, always, you're going to have to go back and change the values once you get the areas around it also done.
So true. Adjusting it as time goes by is very necessary.
Is that what you guys do?
Yes.
And many times, you can go back the next day and look at your drawing, and you have a fresh new perspective on what needs to be done and what needs to be changed that you didn't even notice the day before.
I do a lot of eraser work after lightning.
I don't want mine to get too dark as I'm working with the tortillon, so I have a tendency to I'm not erasing, I'm sticking it down just to pick up some of my graphite.
You're like sopping it up in them,
Yeah.
in a way, yeah. All this area right here, I'm gonna try to put it in with the tortillon only, and if I don't get it dark enough, I'll have to go over it with the graphite, but we'll see. Even with the tortillon, you gotta go with small strokes. And I've seen students in the past try to cover a huge amount of area with the tortillon with long strokes, and it looks just as streaky as the pencil line does look streaky when you make long strokes with a pencil line. So you have to go all different directions and small strokes.
And then sometimes students will press too hard and then leave indentions in their paper, and then it messes up their whole drawing also.
So true.
Right.
Anytime you press too hard on paper, you're going to make a ditch with your pencil point, generally with your pencil point. And what happens with this ditch is nothing will go in it, and it stays as a white line because you can't get any graphite in it or anything, and then it's a mess.
Well, sometimes
it's
you can
permanent.
use that to your advantage if you have wispy hairs or a bright white hair, and we'll give you something to inscribe that line. But that's not going to be in everybody's picture because not everybody has something that's applicable to that. Oops, this is too
So
dark.
true.
And then like long hair and grass, your eraser is going to be what gives you your texture. Once you fill in the patches of the value, and then you kind of run your eraser through it and pull out the highlights of the blades of grass or the hair. I think I'm ready to do this now.
Now on mine, I have, I've put in the shadow, the shading on the upper lid, and I've put in the shading where the eyelashes are, but I haven't drawn eyelashes. I'm not ready to. It's one of the last things you want to do, because if you see defined eyelashes, you don't want to smear them later, if they're defined, and because they stick out, they're the closest thing to you, so they probably usually should be the last thing that you add. So I've got the darkness for them, but not any definition, and I'll go back and do that towards the end. Mine are kind of, they're actually, the ones in this photo are kind of smeared, looking kind of blurry.
Maybe that's why it looks so funny to people when they're starting to learn to draw at this stage, because you guys are used to starting with the details, but we're making you start with the background area so you can put the details on top. Things like hair or whatever, I like to say it's like putting sprinkles on a birthday cake. You're gonna put the hair and the details on after you've done the background work, just like you put the sprinkles on a cake after you put the frosting on it. So skin is kind of like frosting, and you have to make sure you have that before you can put details on it.
So I want to pose a question to you. If a person doesn't have this white spot, this right there in their eye in real life, why do we add it in the drawing? Why even bother? I know the reason. Somebody else tell me the reason.
Why bother?
Why bother?
Creates the reflection, it makes them
Miss
look
Devline, you good for Tuesday?
alive.
Yeah.
Makes them look
Okay,
alive,
okay.
and it makes their eye look wet. It is wet. All of our eyes are wet. That's why we blink to keep them wet. And so we've got a reflection there that shows that alive wetness, and it's really necessary. And an eye that is drawn that has no reflection at all does have a dead look to it.
A zombie eye.
Now, I'm about to do the color on the iris, and I've always had a particular way I do it that maybe no one else does, but I put rays that go out from the center to begin with, and then I start working and fixing them, because it make it look like, well, people that have hazel eyes especially, I just start with that, and then I go and kind of make some of them show and some of them not show.
It's funny because I did the exact same thing but didn't realize I did it till you said it.
Isn't that funny? Huh, that is odd. And it's not that it's gonna look like that when it's done, but that's the way I always start.
So that brings up a good point. Every time you have to have some sort of direction to your drawing, you have to make sure that your pencil does that direction, so that your textures and the little details and stuff like that match your photograph.
My pencil's getting dull. I'm gonna show you a way that I really like to, I'll borrow this. But I really like to sharpen my pencil quickly, not have to get up. I roll towards me. No, I roll away from me, but I pull towards me. And I do this until I get a point again. Usually I can do this 3 times where I have to go really, truly sharpen it. And I do this with colored pencils to make them last longer, not chew them up in the sharpener so quick. Now I have a new point, and I can proceed with some areas that really needed detail. I hate a dull pencil. I think a dull pencil, you can't be precise. You can't get it exactly where you intend it to be.
And if it gets too dull, you start scratching your paper with the wood, so never get it.
Oh no, that's really dull.
That's really dull.
I've got my rays, and I've got my darkest. A lot of times if the person's eyes are not brown, there's a darker area around the outside of the iris also. It's kind of like a halo around it, a ring. So I've got that, and I'm going to use my Portalon to try to fill everything in now. Just make it all go together. If it doesn't do right, I'll readjust it. Probably need to. There we go. It's not too bad.
So I've blurred all my values to almost the same sort of dark gray, so I'm going back and I'm putting in the darks again because it's all comparative.
Yes.
And so I'm building that up. If you have a hard time seeing if you've got an area, especially a larger area, dark or light enough, put your photograph next to your paper, stand up and go about 10 feet away, and look at it from a different angle. Don't look at it from right side up. Because
Turn it upside down.
yeah, turn it upside down or look at it from a different angle, because that's going to just have your brain or look at the large areas of darks and lights, and it'll be real easy to see if you've got enough in a certain place, and then you can go back and lighten things up or darken it up the way you need to.
Now the lower lid on an eye, that thickness of our lid always shows, always. And that's what makes it look real, is that you've got that, and it's not bright white. You have to give some flesh tone to it, so it's got to be a medium gray.
This is like speed drawing.
Yes.
Yes.
Students, we're going faster than we normally would because we want to get it all in the video, so it may not be as accurate as if we were doing it and taking our time.
Yeah, and I think we all have examples of us taking our time to show you.
Yeah.
This is a good start.
Now on mine, as I get towards this area right here, I don't want my line to show, so it's time for me to go in there and erase it and just remember where it was supposed to be about, so I can take that shading out very subtly and blending. But if I left it, it would show through, and that'd be a disaster. It still shows a little bit, but I think I can cover it up. There we go. It's not going to show. That's how far I needed to go with the most of the dark.
You'll need to do that for most of the subtle value changes in skin in large areas, because the line that you gridded isn't necessarily the line where everything abruptly stops. It's the place where you know that there's a change somewhere, and you have to go back and figure out what it is based on your photograph, and then make that subtle change.
Exactly, and I've seen students get all that done, and then they're filling in value without looking at their photo, and it's like, How can you get it to look realistic if you're not even using your reference on what it's supposed to look like? It's
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah, it's probably important for them to know that we're all using the photo. We're not drawing from our imagination here.
We look at it all the time. So your photo should be with you so you can continually glance. And the video doesn't have a wide enough range to show you how often we glance at the photograph.
Which is constantly.
Pretty constantly. We look like little yo-yo heads. I don't know if any of you guys are having trouble trying to figure out what the lines mean on this graph. And the reason I am is because I didn't do this gridding. Ms. Thompson did this gridding. And so she knows what they all mean.
I'm having the same trouble because I didn't do mine.
Yeah, so that is exactly why everybody has to do their own grid, and you can't just use somebody else's, because what one person thinks is important to grid may not necessarily be what you think is important. And you're more familiar with your picture than anybody else is.
So true. Sometimes I might make a line on the grid and someone else would make it a totally enclosed shape. But if I know that that line means something to me, like, oh, this is where I start changing, then that's all I need. But somebody else may need to know the entire area of that particular value. Just depends. And that comes with practice and experience.
Right. But a good rule of thumb when you're gridding is try to put at least one mark in every box on your paper so that you have not got any huge areas that don't have any information, because it's easier to find what you need to find in a 1-inch area than a 6-inch area. I hope that made sense. That makes sense?
I have a situation on my paper that there's a ditch right there. I'm sure it won't show in the video, but it's a white mark that I can't fill in with my tortillon or my pencil at all. And that's one of those cases where the paper that I picked up from the very beginning had a scratch in it from mishandling or from whatever, but it had a scratch in it. And so that's why we also stress you take care of your paper, because you never know when something's going to happen like that, and then it messes up your picture. Because scratches don't go away.
So it looks like Ms. Summerall's ready for some eyebrows. So you want to give us eyebrow tips in a second?
Yeah.
Standing back and observing it first.
She's standing back and observing it. She's no longer with us over here. I'm about ready to do bottom eyelashes. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. I'm still struggling to get rid of my line that was the outermost shading. That's why we stress when you transfer really, really lightly. I'm having to use my regular eraser to just go in there and get it so I can barely see it. Transfer your lines quite lightly. And you won't struggle to erase them so much.
Because I started with midtones, I'm having to really
Work on the darks.
step back and look and see where it needs to be lighter and where it needs to be darker now.
Right. And a lot of times, and we'll decide when we see you guys on the case-by-case basis with your pictures, but a lot of you, if you have some real tiny details or hair places, we might switch you to a harder graded graphite pencil so that it will stay sharper longer and you can get some fine details. But that is at the very, very end. And not everybody needs that. But it helps get things, because once you finish smearing with your tortillon, everything looks fuzzy and you need to go put some sharpness back in the world.
Yeah. Okay, I put in some of my eyelashes, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to fuzzy them because they're standing out too much now. And they're just some eyelashes. Everybody's eyelashes are spaced out differently, and they're not all going to show. If you show every single eyelash, it's going to look like a cartoon.
Yeah.
Just draw what you see. So I smeared them. I thought that was important. And then I may go back and enhance the base of a couple of them where they touch the lid. Something like that. I'm not sure. I'll reevaluate it later. And the interesting thing is all of our drawings look different because people draw differently, but yet at the same time they all look realistic. Your
Well, I
style
think
should
that's
come
style.
through. Yeah, your
Mhm.
style
Yeah.
should come through.
And mine is totally different from yours, for sure.
Well, and you haven't used the tortillon on your darks yet. Oh, I see. You
I
picked
have.
up the ebony pencil also.
That's
No,
all I've used.
you haven't used the tortillon on these yet.
I have, but I went back and added
And so it's
more.
grainy looking
Mhm.
until you get finished. Yeah.
But I like the grainy. That's part of my
Oh,
style.
you like the grainy. I like the smooth. You picked up the ebony, and that's actually what I'm going to use with my students. I'm going to pick up the ebony right here and get my darkest darks in there. Because I like it. It really does dark areas.
I don't like his eyebrows.
His eyebrows are
They need to be waxed
probably going to be a little tough to do.
or threaded or something. There's a lot
Yeah.
going on there.
I'm putting in upper eyelashes right now, and I'm trying to go the direction that they are. When you're over here, they come this way. When you're over here, they go that way. And they may be too distinct, and I'm probably going to have to go in there and blur them
Yes, as
because they'll look just too fake if I leave them just like they
as
are.
I was putting mine in, I kind of went in all different directions with them. Because here, they appear to kind
Yeah.
of be.
And because
Awesome.
eyelashes come out and come towards a person, the eyelashes come out of the body and come towards in a kind of a horizontal manner, you should never make them straight up. That would be like a girl that has curled her eyelashes and put mascara on them, and that's just not what we're trying to achieve there. So
Well, his eyebrows are.
they
kinda
look
straight
like a
out, too.
wide line often. A wide line, because they're not distinct individual eyelashes going straight up. It's not, life's not that way.
Miss Summerall's not a fan of the eyebrows.
I'm not. They're crazy.
I'm about to try them. Okay,
Ooh, y'all are patient. Thanks for sticking with us.
all right.
When I do eyelashes or eyebrows or hair, I don't necessarily draw a line. I like to wiggle my pencil down
Mhm.
so that it's wider at the base. I don't know if you already said that.
Mm-mm.
When I made this tracing, I made just a few lines that indicated the direction of the eyebrow. Eyebrows, yeah. Because if you don't on your grid put the direction of hair, at least some, later on, you'll put it in the wrong direction. And if it's in the wrong direction, it doesn't look real.
Right, and the individual strands, the technique is if you have those strokes going in the correct direction, then you can use the tortillon to blend them, and then you use the kneaded eraser to pull through in strokes. And it kind of ends up like a happy accident.
Right, I'm on my happy accident right now. And I've got some of these dark ones in here, and now I'm going to go, and I'll use the other one. I'm going to go and lightly put a gray all over it. But there's white areas, or very, very light areas in that eyebrow area that I'm going to have to pick out with my kneaded eraser. So I will be pinching it into a fine edge when I'm ready to take those out.
Kind of like a blade shape.
Because I could work around and leave them, but that isn't easy.
You almost don't have to work directional on his eyebrows, though.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going in
So we'll
and
make a waxing
blurring it
appointment.
all. And then I've got a basic gray foundation for this area of his eyebrows. And then I'm gonna pinch it, give it a try here. And I may not get them exactly, but I'll try. I get one here. If your kneaded eraser is clean enough, you can get a pretty good light area. If you haven't mashed your tortillon into your paper so heavy that it's bonded with the paper, your graphite should still be sitting up on the top. Okay. And my lines are turning out bigger than I want them to be, but then I'll go back and
I'm gonna slide this
work
way.
on each side of
Okay.
them to get
Is that
them.
one to look at?
I'm kind of looking over there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was digging it.
I feel like this one's just gotta go. That's gotta go.
Oh, you don't like that?
That right there?
Well, that's
She's
artist
editing. She's
choice.
editing. Yes,
Yeah,
artist choice.
it's going.
And you know, and that's another true thing is there's always something called artist license to do what you feel is necessary to make your picture better.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you're doing a rodeo art picture and there's some truck in the background and it has nothing to do with making your picture look Western, don't
Take it
draw
out.
it. Take it
Yeah.
out. Just leave it out. And don't agonize that it's there. Just leave it out. And there's usually a background grass or tree that you can add in and make up the difference.
Right. One of the things probably everybody's going to be urged to do from all the teachers is part of our license there, our choices, is to exaggerate the contrast sometimes. Well, most of the time.
Oh, yes.
Because you can do that, and not necessarily a photograph. A camera can't because it's only taking what it sees. But the more contrast you have, the more real and three-dimensional this picture will look. That is how the artist builds depth, is through contrast.
Okay, I'm sharpening my pencil again, so I
And
don't
that's
have to
how
leave.
it looks good from far away, too.
Yeah. Because if you get far away and everything's kind of like some sort of a gray,
Blurred together.
it looks like a big floor mat with lines in it.
Yes, so true. I always say to the students, stand 6 feet away from your picture. And if it's all gray looking, you got a problem. You've got to get some darks in there and get some whites or lights.
And like we said already, that sometimes you may have thought that would have been dark enough when you started, but when you put the other around it, it's not dark enough anymore. And also, a lot of times you start smudging into your light areas and you have to go clean them up.
When you go to an art gallery and you view famous art, you usually stand around 6 feet away. Because sometimes if you go a little closer, the docents say, back off. In fact, I just love to go look really, really close at a John Singer Sargent brush strokes. And the docents at the Houston Museum say, back off.
Back off! Back
Like,
off!
I'm studying this. So 6 feet away, it should look like good contrast.
Quit breathing on the art.
Okay, now,
I
I'm gonna
went
blur these
for
guys.
a educator's class a couple of weeks ago, and even though I was with a curator and 2 instructors, the docents were still saying, "Can you back up?"
I love to go and point out things to my friends on the picture, and they're going, back away, back
I don't know what's going on with these eyebrows.
away. Okay,
Told
his
you.
eyebrow, I got it looking like a head of hair.
Pretty wild.
Okay.
Yeah, but everybody learn how to draw hair.
Oh yeah, if you can do these, you can do any.
Shh, don't tell them that it's difficult. They won't know.
Oh, it's so easy.
Simple, easy, cheesy macaroni. Breezy. Wait, that was wrong.
Sounded good though.
Okay,
Easy peasy,
that one too.
lemon easy.
I'm even gonna blur the edge of the iris because I don't think it needs to be that
I'm trying
distinct
to
on my
catch up.
picture.
I think I have.
Oh,
I
and
have,
I've got my
I
highlights.
cover up my eye here. I've got like a rooster thing
I
going.
want to not forget to make, I had my highlight that's in the eyeball, just bright white paper, and that was too much, so. Because there's shadow on the highlight too. The eyelashes have cast a shadow even on the reflection. So I'm gonna gray it down a little bit with my Tortolon. And that's okay. Oh, and you know, another thing is your highlight in your eyeball should never look like it has an outline around it.
Oh, yeah.
That would be cartoonish.
Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse. When you get to places where the hairline starts, like right where your skin starts to grow hair, if you see your forehead, or along here where the eyebrows are pretty, not in the middle because they're too bushy, but near the edges where it starts to thin out, you still have to go back and put a skin tone under before you can start working with the hair that's on top. Because otherwise you'll get the perfect little hair strokes and ruin it when you go put skin under it. Sorry.
Now it's time for me to
World's fastest drawing.
get the. I think they'll hang in with us this long. This is a long time.
I know.
Someone is probably on their phone in the back right now.
Oh, so true. Someone else is sleeping.
Yeah, but we can stop it and let them draw a little at a time.
Someone's
Yeah.
probably doing Candy Crush or Facebook or tweeting about how ridiculous.
So there you know,
Yes.
students, we know exactly how y'all are.
Yeah, except with the video playing, we can stand back there.
Oh, true.
We just
We're two places at one
we
time.
doubled ourselves.
Watching you in the back while we're actually drawing. Ha ha.
And we actually think we're pretty funny up here.
But at least now you know all four of us art teachers can do art.
Mm-hmm. We're pretty darn good.
I'm always amazed when the student comes up and sees something near my desk and said, "You did that?" Well, yeah, I teach art. You did that? Yeah, I would hope I wouldn't have this job if I didn't have the ability.
But there's
So-
places that do. There's
Yeah.
lots of places where the art teachers don't know how to do it.
Oh, what a shame.
Do
Yeah.
as I say, not as I do.
Do as I say, not as I do. So.
Because in reality, all of us have shown and sold work, so hopefully that is inspiring for you guys and an indicator that we do know what we're doing. You just have to try. It's not easy, but if you follow the steps, it's easier,
And we didn't finish in 2 minutes.
like we wanted to, because it's a long video.
Okay, I'm trying to give him some wispy hairs. I don't know how successful that's going to be.
I think
I'll
Miss
try.
Thompson cleaned up his eyebrows.
Oh, I probably did. Yeah.
Oh, I
Artist
think-
license, artist license. No, I'm going to add in some more stuff.
See?
Mine,
I
mine
got
still
to.
looks like a rooster's.
Because he looks like he got shaved right here, so I got to get something in there, even though it's not really in the picture. I've got to enhance it.
Well, I tried to follow these main
Yeah.
chunks of value, and now I'm working on my happy accident. I've shaped this into a kind of a blade shape, and I'm pulling it through. And what happens where there's a lot of graphite, it sort of blends it, but if there's a little chunk that doesn't have a lot of graphite, as you pull it through, it sort of comes up as a highlight. And this is where you don't follow exactly sometimes what your picture says, because this is where I would give you a harder leaded pencil so that you can go in there and highlight these highlights that just sort of showed up.
And a harder lead pencil makes a lighter gray. It doesn't come out with a dark, dark.